All right, so today we're diving into the world of cybersecurity.
Definitely a hot topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
And with us today, we have an expert in all things cybersecurity
I try to keep up at least.
to break down NIST's updated cybersecurity framework
2.0.
2.0. That's right, this isn't our first rodeo with the CSF, so
Right, they've upped their game.
we're going deep on what's new and what it means for, well, everyone.
Absolutely. Because at this point, cybersecurity really touches everyone.
Yeah, it's like every day there's a new headline about a data breach or some big cyber attack. It can feel kind of overwhelming, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It can be a lot, for sure. But honestly, you don't have to be like a tech genius
Right.
to wrap your head around the basics of cybersecurity.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
It all comes back to risk.
Yeah.
And everyone understands risk in one way or another.
Okay, so how does this all tie back to NIST? Where does the cybersecurity framework fit into all of this?
You can think of the CSF like a playbook. It's there to help organizations of all sizes, all industries really, to understand,
Yeah.
manage, and hopefully reduce those cyber risks we're always hearing about.
So it's not like a checklist.
No, not at all. It's way more flexible than that.
Okay, good, because checklists can be a little intimidating.
Exactly. The CSF is built around 6 core functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover.
Okay.
And new in this version, govern.
Governed.
It's like we're building a fortress around your most important stuff. Your data, your people, even your reputation.
A fortress. All right, I'm intrigued. Ready to build a fortress. So how do we get started? What's the first brick we lay down?
You got to start with the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, that means knowing what you need to protect. That's where identify comes in.
So it's like taking inventory.
Exactly. What are your organization's crown jewels?
Right.
That's super critical data. The systems that are basically keeping the lights on.
I was going to say, is it literally crown jewels?
Mm-hmm.
Because that would be bad.
Not literally, no.
Okay, good.
But you get the idea.
I do. It's the really important stuff.
Exactly. And it goes beyond that, too.
So we're talking about things like, I imagine, customer data, financial records,
Absolutely.
intellectual property, all the good stuff that you really don't want falling into the wrong hands.
All of that. And sometimes, an organization's most valuable asset isn't a piece of technology.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's the people.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Their skills, their relationships, that can be incredibly valuable.
Right, which is why those social engineering attacks can be so effective, right?
Exactly.
You trick someone into giving up their credentials, boom, you bypass all the fancy tech defenses.
Exactly. That's why identify has to cover the human element, too.
It's not just about hardware and software.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've identified what we need to protect, those crown jewels, we'll call them.
Right.
What's next? How do we start building those fortress walls?
That's where protect comes in.
Okay.
All about putting safeguards in place to keep those crown jewels safe.
So we're talking about things like strong passwords,
Of course.
firewalls, encryption software.
The usual suspects, for sure. All those are important,
Right.
but the CSF goes beyond just the basics.
Okay.
It also really pushes organizations to prioritize employee training.
Oh, right. Because I was going to say, even with the best passwords and all that tech, all it takes is one employee clicking on a phishing link
Right.
and the whole fortress crumbles.
Exactly. It all falls apart.
Right.
So that training, creating that cybersecurity awareness that's crucial,
Yeah.
it gets everyone on the same page about keeping things secure.
Makes sense. So we've identified what we need to protect. We've put some initial protections in place. But let's be real. No fortress is impenetrable, right?
Of course not. There's always a way in if someone's determined enough.
So what happens when our defenses are breached? What then?
That's where things get interesting, because that's when you need to detect that something's wrong.
Right.
Right? You need to know that somebody's trying to get in, even if they got past those first couple layers of defense.
Okay, so what are we talking here? Intrusion detection systems, security information and event management, the SIEM tools.
All of that.
Okay.
That's part of the puzzle.
Right.
But detect isn't just about the technology. It's also about human vigilance, having those sharp eyes on the ground.
Right. So it's like the technology can only take you so far.
Right.
You also need someone who can look at all of that and actually notice that something's off.
You got it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not even one big thing,
Right.
It's a bunch of little things that by themselves might not mean much, but
Put them together.
when you put them all together,
Yeah.
that's when you know there's a problem.
Like, oh, this is sus.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
like this.
Exactly.
Something's going on.
Yeah. And that's why you need those human eyes doing that analysis, ideally.
Right, because it's one thing to have the alarm bells going off.
Right.
But if nobody's around to hear them or nobody knows what they mean, it's not doing you much good. And the faster you can detect a potential breach,
Yes.
the faster you can then
Respond.
respond. Okay, so that brings us to
Right.
our next core function,
Exactly.
which is respond.
Respond, right?
So this is where things, I imagine, get a little bit more...
This is where it gets real.
Yeah, okay, a little bit more intense. So
Yeah.
what does that look like? What does it mean to respond effectively to a cybersecurity incident?
You've got to have a plan,
Okay.
a game plan.
Right, like a battle plan.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because you don't want to be figuring this out as it's happening.
Right, right.
You need to know how you're going to minimize the damage, how you're going to get rid of the threat, and get back to business.
Right, so it's like, all right, team, we have a situation. Everyone knows their roles.
Right.
Let's go. Let's do this.
You got it.
Execute the plan.
And you got to think about communication too, right?
Oh, right. Because it's one thing to have the plan internally,
Yeah.
but you also probably need to be communicating with your customers.
You might need to communicate with the public, depending on how big of a deal it is.
Right, exactly.
Because transparency, especially when you're talking about trust.
Right, and your reputation.
Right. That's everything.
Okay, so we've gone through identify, protect, detect, respond. But let's say the worst happens, right?
Right.
The attackers, they got in, they got what they wanted.
It happens.
Is all hope lost? What do we do?
No, not at all. This is where recover takes over.
Okay, so recover is about picking up the pieces after an attack, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's putting everything back together.
Okay.
Hopefully better than it was before, or at least you're in a better position.
Right, so it's not just about restoring things to how they were before the attack. It's about learning and growing from the experience.
Right. You figure out how they got in, what went wrong.
Right. What can we do better next time?
Exactly.
So it's like turning a negative into a positive. You
Yeah.
learn from it, you get stronger, you're better prepared for the next one.
You got it.
Okay.
That's the goal, at least.
I like it. So we've covered 5 of the 6 core functions. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover.
Right.
What about that 6th one, that new one, govern? Where does that fit into all of this?
You know how we've been talking about building a fortress?
Yeah.
Govern is like the foundation.
Okay.
It's the bedrock that everything else is built on.
Okay.
It's all about leadership, policies, procedures,
Right.
really making sure that all your cybersecurity efforts are lined up
Okay.
and that they're actually working.
So it's not just about having a strong fortress. It's about having like a good king or queen in charge.
That's a great way to put it.
Making sure everybody knows this is important. These are the rules.
Exactly. Yeah, because cybersecurity, it really has to be a top-down priority.
Right.
If the people in charge don't get it,
Right.
then it doesn't matter how strong your defenses are.
Right. Because they're just not going to be enforced.
Exactly.
And it's not going to be taken seriously.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, when we're talking about the CSF,
Yeah.
it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, right?
Right. Because you're building different fortresses
Exactly.
to protect different things, different environments.
Right. Yeah, and that's where the CSF profiles and tiers come in.
Okay. So let's talk about those.
Okay.
Starting with profiles. How does that work?
So just like you wouldn't build the same fortress to defend, I don't know, a mountain pass
Right.
that you would to defend a city,
Right.
your cybersecurity approach is going to look different depending on your needs.
Right.
You've got your current profile, which is basically where you're at right now,
Okay.
and then your target profile, which is where you want to be.
So current profile is like your security audit, figuring out your strengths and weaknesses,
Exactly.
and your target profile is your cybersecurity wish list. Like, this is what we want it to look like someday.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay.
And, you know, to help organizations kind of get started with this whole thing,
Yeah.
the CSF also has these things called community profiles.
Oh, okay. Tell me about those.
So it's like they're pre-made profiles, essentially.
Okay.
They're tailored for specific industries, specific situations.
So if you're a hospital, for example,
Exactly.
there
Yeah,
might be a community profile for that.
exactly. And that's going to have a bunch of cybersecurity best practices.
Right. Because they're dealing with sensitive patient data.
Right. And other industries can learn from what they're doing.
Oh,
Right.
makes sense. Makes sense.
It helps everyone get on the same page.
Okay, so that makes sense. You've got your blueprint. You kind of know what a good fortress should look like.
Right.
But how do you actually know how strong to build those walls? You know, how much security is enough security?
That's where tiers come in.
Okay, tell me about tiers.
So think of tiers as your levels of
Yes.
cybersecurity maturity,
Okay.
from the very basic
Okay.
all the way up to, super sophisticated.
So tier 1 is kind of like your basic fortress.
Yeah, exactly.
It's functional. It might keep out, I don't know.
Right. It's a deterrent,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, it's a deterrent.
But you're not going to stop a serious attacker.
Right. And then tier, 4? Is that the highest?
Tier 4 is the top.
Okay.
That's like, those impenetrable fortresses you see in the movies.
Yeah, you're not getting in.
No way.
So how do you decide what tier is right for you?
That's a great question.
Yeah, because you can go overboard, right? You could spend
You could spend way too much
way too much time.
money.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about finding that balance, right?
Right.
How much risk are you willing to accept versus how much are you willing to spend?
Right. Because nothing is ever going to be 100% secure.
Right.
And I'm also thinking, we've been talking about cybersecurity kind of in its own bubble here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really exist like that, right?
No, absolutely not.
It's got to be part of a bigger risk management strategy.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
You can't just focus on cybersecurity and ignore everything else.
Right. Because what's the point of having a really secure fortress if, your supply chain is compromised?
Right. Or you have some financial vulnerability that's totally unrelated.
Exactly. Exactly.
So how does the CSF address that?
Well, the CSF 2.0, it really emphasizes connecting cybersecurity with your overall risk management approach,
Okay.
which includes things like ERM, enterprise risk management.
Okay, so ERM, is that basically about looking at all the different kinds of risks that are out there?
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
And figuring out how to manage them in a smart way.
Right, so it's financial risks, operational risks, even legal risks.
All of it.
Yeah, okay.
Because they're all connected.
Right, and they can all be impacted by a cybersecurity incident.
Exactly.
Right, so if you have a data breach,
Yep.
that could lead to financial losses, legal problems, damage to your reputation.
All of that.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah, that's why it's got to be a team effort.
Right, it's not just the IT department's problem anymore. It's
Right.
everybody's problem.
It really is.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. We've learned a ton about NIST's updated Cybersecurity Framework 2.0.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. But even if you're not a cybersecurity expert,
Right.
even if you're just listening to this, on your way to work or something,
Yeah.
I think there are some really good takeaways here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
This isn't just about protecting big corporations and government agencies.
It's about all of us.
It's about all of us, right? Because
Yeah.
we all have our own crown jewels, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
Our personal data, our financial information,
Our photos, all of it.
all of that, and we can all take steps to protect it.
Exactly. And the principles we've talked about today, they apply no matter how big or small you are.
Exactly.
It all comes back to those 6 functions. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and of course,
Govern.
Yeah, even if it's just governing yourself.
Right, exactly.
Making sure that you're following those best practices.
Right, being smart about your passwords, careful about the links you click on.
Yeah, and thinking about what information you're putting out there.
Right, being a little bit more mindful
Yeah.
of our digital footprint, so to speak.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into NIST's Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. We covered a lot of ground today, but the good news is
Right, it's not as complicated as it sounds.
it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Yeah,
And anybody can use these principles to improve their own cybersecurity posture.
exactly. You got it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, stay curious and stay secure out there.